Well, you did a show with Van Jones where he called you despicable and you told him to shut the fuck up.
I actually didn't do a show with him, funny enough. They wouldn't have me, right? So I went on with Don Lemon and he said, I think he said something to the effect of, you can disagree with me when you have the same skin that I do, which is ironic because if you look at Don Lemon, there's a cosmetic irony that you probably couldn't tell us too many shades apart, but he meant, black in the sense of capital B black. And, I think that ended up, it was an interview where he was so hostile to being challenged on facts of American history that he ended up getting fired. That was CNN. The Van Joneses of the world, they wouldn't dare talk to me, actually, right? Because by that point in the campaign, I don't blow up on set at these people. I believe in rational, cold discourse, but some of them self-immolate. It's one of the things we noticed during the campaign. They go into tailspin themselves. And so I think the executives at some of these networks started to notice. So that's why the CNNs and the MSNBCs of the world, they haven't had me in recent months, if you'll notice that, even in the tail end of the campaign. But Van Jones heard me say something at the Republican presidential debate and said he was shaking. He said, I'm shaking that this demagogue is going to live. And I want to actually, let's just open this up. I'll lay out exactly what happened here. So he brought it back. He says that this guy is going to be alive 50 years from now when Donald Trump is long dead. I'm shaking. Right? You're seeing the next generation of American demagogue. You don't know what happens in the next 2 weeks that follow? Multiple death threats. There's a guy who is arrested with very specific plans in one of the states that we're visiting. You got somebody the next day or 2 days later, call to our house, okay? Somebody gets a phone call saying that they've murdered 4 people at the site that they're describing exactly us, waking up in the middle of the night, 2 days after that other death threat that we face. If this was the other way around and somebody says something like this person's going to be alive and there's death threats days later and it was in reverse, the media would be having a conniption. And so I'm not a big guy. I don't play the victim card. I don't believe in victimhood mentality, but I think it's worth the public seeing what it is. And so that's Van Jones. And so you know what? I don't use profane language easily unless to make a point, okay? But yes, when I went on a stage and was asked about what Van Jones thought of me or had to say about me, yeah, I said what I said, and I'm not ashamed of it because this is part of it. People say, well, what are those the values you teach your kid to talk that way? No, but here's what I do teach my kid, all right? Don't let anybody bully you. You don't become a bully. Don't bully somebody else. You don't go out of your way finding monsters to destroy, to borrow a expression of John Quincy Adams. I think it's true today. You don't go in search of monsters to destroy. You don't go bully other people. But if somebody bullies you, somebody hits you, you hit them back 10 times harder because you have to be strong enough to protect your kindness. You cannot forget what you're fighting for or what you're protecting. And I think that's so true of America today. We have to be strong enough to protect our inner kindness. And so, yes, I think that are there times in the campaign where I was a porcupine at times? You come for me, you try to hit me, you're going to bleed by trying to take a swipe. Yes, you got to have your inner porcupine ready to be able to defend what you're fighting for. And I'm not going to be somebody who is a wilting flower that rolls over for anybody. All right. But it is in service of something greater. And we're not going to search for people to bully around. To the contrary, actually, I think one of the things we're missing in this country is a revival of compassion for those who disagree with us, respect and dignity for those who disagree with us. And to be able to say, you know what? I may not agree with you, but just for a minute, right? I'm going to try on what you have to say like a set of clothes. Maybe it's not going to fit, and I'll put it back on the rack. I don't have to buy it, but I'm at least going to try it on to see if it fits. I had an English teacher who, back to St. Xavier High School, where you brought it up, early on in this conversation, where I went. She said, if you can't state the best argument for the other side, then you don't know what you actually believe. And I think that's true. I think it's absolutely true. So it's one of the things I tried to do in the campaign. It's the standard I held myself to. Standard I hold myself to today. If I cannot offer a better statement of the other side's position, then that means that I don't know what I actually believe. Take the transgender point. Let me just do that. I haven't done this one before, but let me take an opportunity to do it right now. The best argument there isn't the person who gets to be identified or is asking to be identified, don't they have the greatest say in determining how they get to be identified? Right? Don't you have the greatest authority over who you are, not somebody else telling you who you are?
Right.
I think it's worth taking that argument seriously. I don't think that the right does that often enough, actually. Well, let's just do a thought experiment, right? And we're going to get spicy here, but that's okay. We got to try it on here. Imagine if you have a white guy who claims to be black, starts talking in Ebonics, wears dreadlocks, and expects to be treated as black, and says, when I apply to college or when I apply for a job that somebody else was going to get, that has a company that's hiring 25% persons of color, and I should get that job because I identify as black. And I live in a community where over 50% of the people are black. And, I paint my face black and wear dreadlocks and, and speak in Ebonic, terms or whatever, right? Offensive stuff. Many people would find that offensive, and rightly so. That's offensive. Because even though that person may believe that, maybe he's mentally deranged, right? Maybe he deserves compassion because he suffers from a mental health disorder. That should be our response there, and would be our response there. Well, when many women competing in women's sports feel that way about a guy who has male sex organs who's competing in the swimming pool, saying, no, that person's not a woman and it's offensive to me, that shows you that we as a society don't say that you're the only person who has a say in what your identity is if you're proclaiming to be part of a community that has actual consequences of being attached to that community. So I believe in taking the argument seriously. I understand. I think it's compelling to say that, hey, aren't I the person who gets to decide what my gender is if I have authority on that and you don't as outsiders? Well, if that has consequences in the world, then no, you're not the only person who has the authority over those consequences, right? So back to my earlier point. In a free country, are you free to identify however you want to? Yes. I don't think somebody should be showing up, the police should be showing up on your door and putting you through forced therapy. No, if you're an adult, I don't believe that should be happening. Just as it shouldn't be happening to the white guy who professes or claims to be black because he's dressed or cosmetically presenting himself in a certain way. But if other people in that community find that offensive, I think that is a real emotion that matters too, especially when that gives the person a claim on something they otherwise wouldn't have. And so anyway, that's on that set of issues, which is particularly hot and controversial right now. But I believe what we're missing is compassion, missing an actual intellectual empathy for people who disagree with us. And I try to bring that back. But when a guy like a Van Jones, without actually engaging in that open debate, is going to say he's shaking and make references to me living in the next 2 weeks, my family's dealing with the consequences of that through death threats and otherwise, you're right. If I'm going to be given a chance to hit back hard, I'm not going to hold back and play with kid gloves either. And I think both of those things are compatible. And I think it's one of the hardest things of running for president. But one of the things that I might do differently if I were to ever do it again is I do think at a certain point in the process, my competitive instincts did take over, right? We're running 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. And I had to do it that way because nobody knew who the hell I was before I ran for president. And so we had to take interview left, right, center, doesn't matter, 11 events in a day at times. But I think if I was to do it again or to give advice to someone doing it from my shoes in the future, it would be to take half an hour a day to just think, actually, to reflect, to meditate, maybe even, right? And to remind yourself of the original purpose that drew you in. Take a couple of weeks off before the first debate. I didn't do that. Should have done it. And I think that's one of the things. I'm not saying I did everything perfectly, but it's one of the things that also, if I were to do it again, stay true to the purpose at every step of the way. Don't let your competitive instincts control you, but I wouldn't say hide from those competitive instincts either. And I think you need to balance both the fighter and the inner kindness that you are fighting for, actually reviving it. It's hard to do both those things at the same time, but nobody said, being the president of the United States was supposed to be an easy job either. And I think that's what it calls for.